The weight of steel. The PPSh-41 submachine gun lies half buried in Norman mud, its drum magazine cracked from the hard landing. Staff Sergeant Jake McNiece crouches in a bombed-out farmhouse doorway, watching German patrols sweep the hedgerows 200 yards away. Behind him, 8 paratroopers from scattered units huddle in the cellar, men who weren't supposed to be here, carrying a weapon that shouldn't exist in American hands. The mission had started simple enough. McNiece and the Filthy 13 were supposed to demolish a stone bridge 3 miles south, cutting off German reinforcements heading toward Omaha Beach. But the C-47 transport took heavy flak over the drop zone, scattering paratroopers across 5 square miles of enemy territory. McNiece landed hard in a cow pasture, his demolition pack torn open, primers scattered in the grass. Now he examines his remaining explosives in the grey pre-dawn light. 2 blocks of TNT, a handful of blasting caps, and 30 feet of detonation cord. Barely enough for one decisive charge. The farmhouse cellar stinks of fear and wet wool. Private Kowalski clutches a bandaged shoulder where shrapnel tore through muscle. Sergeant Davies from the 82nd keeps checking his watch, muttering about missed rendezvous points. "We're sitting ducks here," McNiece whispers, studying the German positions through broken window frames. "That bridge is still intact, which means armor's coming up this road by sunrise." Davies nods grimly. "Battalion expects us to hold until relieved. Orders are to keep that bridge open for our own counterattack." McNiece runs his fingers along the detonation cord, feeling its rough weave. The length worries him. 30 feet might reach the bridge's center span, but barely. He'd prefer 50 feet of cord to ensure proper placement against the steel support beams. Everything about this situation violates textbook procedure. Insufficient explosives, scattered personnel, no communication with command. "What if the counterattack never comes?" McNiece asks quietly. The question hangs in the air like cordite smoke. Through the cellar floorboards, they hear German voices getting closer. Methodical search patrols moving through abandoned farmsteads. McNiece knows they have minutes, not hours, before discovery becomes inevitable. His hands shake slightly as he rewraps the TNT blocks, remembering similar moments from training when everything depended on getting the charges exactly right. The bridge represents more than a tactical objective. It's the difference between German armor rolling freely toward the beach or being forced into a costly detour through marshy ground. But holding it intact also means 8 trapped paratroopers facing tank treads on open causeway stone. McNiece's personal code never permits abandoning soldiers under his command, yet following orders might doom them all. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. At 5:15 hours, German voices echo across the flooded Norman fields, search patrols moving systematically through abandoned farmsteads. McNiece positions himself at a blown-out window, offering clear sightlines to the stone bridge while providing minimal cover. The structure spans a narrow canal feeding into the Douve River, its medieval stonework now reinforced with steel beams the Wehrmacht installed last month. 2 squads coming up the main road, Davies whispers, peering through a gap in the cellar wall. They're checking every building. McNiece studies the bridge through binoculars liberated from a dead German officer. The steel reinforcements create obvious weak points where properly placed charges could drop the center span into the canal. But those same beams would require precise placement and enough cord to reach them from a safe firing position. Private Rodriguez from the 502nd crawls over, his face pale with exhaustion. "Sergeant, my squad was supposed to meet up with Baker Company 6 hours ago. Think they made it to the rally point?" "Don't know, kid. Right now, we worry about getting ourselves there." The immediate tactical picture becomes clearer as dawn approaches. German positions form a tightening noose around this sector of the Normandy beachhead, with armor probing roads leading back toward Omaha Beach. Every minute the bridge remains intact brings enemy tanks closer to rolling freely through American lines. Yet demolishing it also cuts off any chance of relief or resupply for scattered airborne units. McNiece examines the TNT blocks again, calculating blast patterns and structural damage. 2 blocks might drop the span if positioned correctly against the central support beam. But the detonation cord presents a crucial limitation. 30 feet means firing the charge from dangerously close range, well within the blast radius of falling masonry. "McNasty, what's the plan?" Davies asks, using the nickname that follows McNiece through every unit he's served with. "Still working on it," McNiece replies, though his mind has already begun sketching the kind of desperate improvisation that made him famous among demolition crews. Through the broken windows, they watch German soldiers methodically clearing the village. Professional, disciplined movements suggest veteran troops rather than green replacements. These men know their business, which makes escape or successful defense significantly more challenging. The weight of leadership presses down on McNiece's shoulders like a waterlogged pack. 8 men look to him for answers he doesn't have, carrying expectations built on stories of his previous actions. But legend and reality rarely match, especially when explosives run short and enemy patrols close in from 3 directions. Kowalski whimpers softly, pain from his shoulder wound mixing with the terror of being trapped behind enemy lines. McNiece hands him a cigarette and lights it with steady fingers, hiding his own fear behind the practiced calm that keeps soldiers functional under impossible conditions. Radio chatter crackles from a German field set abandoned in the farmhouse kitchen, fragments of orders and position reports that Davies translates in urgent whispers. 2 panzer companies are moving up the coastal roads toward Omaha Beach, with advance elements expected to reach the bridge before noon. The news confirms McNiece's worst fears about holding position. "Baker Company got chewed up at Sainte-Mère-Église," Davies reports, his face grim. "No relief coming our way." The strategic picture crystallizes with brutal clarity. American airborne forces scattered across Normandy are fighting isolated actions with whatever weapons and explosives they carry. No grand tactical coordination, no neat arrows on situation maps, just small groups of paratroopers making desperate choices that might influence the entire invasion's outcome. McNiece walks the bridge approach alone, studying sightlines and defensive positions, while German patrols remain occupied searching the village. The stone causeway offers no cover for defenders, making it a killing ground once enemy armor arrives. Steel beams installed by Wehrmacht engineers create natural choke points, but also structural weak spots where demolition charges could achieve maximum effect. He runs his hand along the central support beam, feeling vibrations from distant artillery. The steel is cold and solid, humming with the kind of structural tension that responds predictably to properly placed explosives. But 30 feet of detonation cord means little margin for error, either in placement or timing. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" Rodriguez asks, joining him on the bridge. "Orders say hold this thing intact," McNiece replies. "But orders don't account for sitting here like ducks in a gallery chute." The moral contradiction tears at him. Following orders might preserve the bridge for American armor that may never arrive, while getting his men killed by German tanks that definitely will. Disobeying orders saves 8 lives in the short term, but potentially costs hundreds more if German reinforcements pour through uncontested. Back in the farmhouse, McNiece spreads the TNT blocks and detonation cord on a wooden table, arranging them like pieces of a puzzle with only one correct solution. The mathematics of demolition allow no wishful thinking. Either the charges drop the span, or they don't. Either his men survive the morning, or they become casualties in someone else's after-action report. Kowalski watches him work, fear and pain making his voice shake. "Sarge, my mom's gonna kill me if I don't make it home. She already lost my brother at Guadalcanal." McNiece looks up from the explosives, seeing his own terror reflected in the kid's eyes. Leadership means carrying other men's fears while hiding his own, making life and death decisions with incomplete information and insufficient resources. The detonation cord feels rough and familiar in his hands, a tool he's used dozens of times in training, but never with stakes this high or margins this thin. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. At 6:30 hours, the distinctive rumble of tank engines echoes across the Norman countryside. McNiece knows that sound, Panzerfus moving in column formation, probably 20 minutes out from the bridge. His decision crystallizes with the brutal simplicity that keeps soldiers alive. Follow orders and watch his men get crushed, or improvise a solution that might save everyone. Davies, get the wounded ready to move, he orders. Rodriguez, Murphy, you're with me on the bridge. The demolition setup requires precise coordination under impossible conditions. McNiece positions the TNT blocks against the central steel beam, where Wehrmacht engineers reinforce the medieval stonework. 2 blocks should generate enough explosive force to shatter the support structure, but placement must be exact. Too high, and the blast dissipates harmlessly. Too low, and the stone absorbs most of the energy. His hands work automatically, muscle memory from countless training exercises guiding the placement of blasting caps and detonation cord. But 30 feet of cord creates a deadly problem. The safe firing distance for 2 blocks of TNT is at least 50 feet. He'll be well within the blast radius when those charges detonate. Sarge, that's cutting it awful close, Rodriguez warns, watching McNiece rig the firing circuit. Yeah, well, close is all we got, McNiece replies, though sweat beads on his forehead despite the cool morning air. The tank engines grow louder, probably 15 minutes out now. German advanced scouts will reach the bridge first, followed by the main armor column. Once those panzers cross intact stone, nothing will stop them from rolling straight into American positions around Omaha Beach. McNiece checks the blasting cap connections twice, ensuring proper electrical contact with the detonation cord. A misfire now means no second chance, and 8 dead paratroopers as German tanks grind across their positions. The weight of that responsibility feels heavier than any equipment he's ever carried. "Everyone else clear the area!" he shouts. "Davies, take them back to that tree line and keep moving toward the rally point." "What about you?" Davies asks, though his expression shows he already knows the answer. "Someone's got to fire these charges at the right moment. Soon as that lead tank commits to the bridge, I drop the span. The tactical logic is sound, but personally suicidal. McNiece must wait until German armor fully commits to crossing before detonating, close enough to ensure the lead tank goes down with the bridge, preventing them from simply backing off and finding another route. That timing requires staying within killing range of his own explosives. Rodriguez grabs his shoulder. "There's got to be another way, McNasty." "This is the way," McNiece says quietly, his voice carrying the finality that ends arguments among soldiers under fire. As his men reluctantly withdraw toward the tree line, McNiece settles behind a low stone wall, 30 feet from the charges, detonation cord leading back to the electrical firing device. The PPSh-41 submachine gun lies forgotten in the mud, symbolic of the improvised violence that brought them this far, but useless now against the approaching armor. The first German scout car appears at 06:47 hours, followed by the grinding mechanical thunder of main battle tanks. McNiece crouches behind the stone wall, watching through binoculars as a Panzer IV approaches the bridge cautiously. Commander's head visible in the turret, scanning for defensive positions or demolition charges. This is the moment his nightmares will replay for decades, one finger resting on the electrical firing device, watching enemy armor move closer to the point of no return. The secret he'll never include in official reports is the pure terror that floods his system as the lead tank's treads touch the bridge approach. Not heroic determination, not calculated courage, just raw, animal fear mixed with the stubborn refusal to let his men die for someone else's tactical theories. The Panzer commander seems to sense something wrong. The tank halts halfway across the bridge, turret traversing slowly as the crew scans for threats. McNiece holds his breath, knowing that any hesitation now gives the Germans time to reverse course and find alternative crossing points. But the tank creeps forward again, committed now to crossing the narrow span. McNiece watches through his scope as a second panzer moves onto the bridge behind the first, followed by a third. Maximum tactical effect requires waiting until at least 2 tanks occupy the center span, but every second increases his own chances of dying in the blast. Come on," he whispers, watching the lead tank approach his carefully calculated firing point. "Just a little more." The detonation cord feels slippery in his sweating hands. Training always emphasized calm, methodical procedures for firing demolition charges, but nothing in the manual covered triggering explosives while enemy tanks grind toward your position. His finger hovers over the firing switch as memories flash through his mind. Oklahoma fields, jump training, the faces of men who've died in previous actions. The moment arrives with mechanical inevitability. Lead tank centered on the span, second tank committed to following. McNiece squeezes the firing device with muscles that remember every demolition he's ever triggered, but this time, the blast radius includes his own position. 2 blocks of TNT detonate simultaneously against the steel support beam, generating a compression wave that shatters medieval stone and modern reinforcement alike. The central span collapses into the canal with a grinding roar, carrying both German tanks into 30 feet of water and mud. But the blast also sends stone fragments and steel splinters in every direction, including toward McNiece's inadequate cover. The shockwave hits him like a physical blow, driving air from his lungs and filling his vision with dust and debris. Something sharp, stone or steel, tears across his helmet with a sound like tearing cloth. The concussion leaves him deaf and disoriented, unsure for crucial seconds whether he's injured or merely stunned. Through ringing ears, he hears the distinctive crack of German rifle fire. Enemy infantry, following behind the armor column, has spotted his firing position and begun systematic suppression. McNiece realizes with cold clarity that surviving the blast was only half the problem. McNiece crawls through the rubble on hands and knees, deaf from the blast and bleeding from multiple small cuts where stone fragments found gaps in his uniform. German rifle fire snaps overhead as enemy infantry positions itself around the collapsed bridge, but their shots lack precision. Dust and smoke from the explosion obscure sight lines in both directions. 30 yards feels like 30 miles as he low crawls toward the tree line where Davies and the others wait. Each movement sends fresh waves of pain through his concussed skull, but the alternative is certain death or capture. Behind him, German voices shout orders as crews work to recover personnel from the submerged tanks. Jesus Christ, McNasty! Rodriguez appears through the smoke, grabbing McNiece's webbing and hauling him toward cover. "Thought you bought it for sure." The after-action report filed 3 weeks later would describe the incident in clean, professional language. Demolition charges successfully employed against enemy armor crossing. Bridge destroyed. Enemy advance halted. No friendly casualties. It would never mention the terror, the impossible timing, or the luck that kept flying steel from opening McNiece's skull like a melon. Davies leads them through Norman hedgerows toward American lines, navigating by compass and dead reckoning. McNiece stumbles along in partial deafness, supported by Rodriguez and Murphy, when exhaustion threatens to drop him. The weight of what he's done and survived settles into his bones like winter cold. Years later, retired in Oklahoma, Jake McNiece would wake some nights to the sound of freight trains crossing steel bridges. The rhythmic clank of wheels on rails would transport him instantly back to that Norman morning when he watched German tanks grind across stone toward his hidden charges. He'd lie awake until dawn, listening to phantom explosions echo through his memory. The citation eventually arrived through official channels. Bronze Star for gallantry in action, signed by Division Command and filed in personnel records. The formal language praised his initiative and courage under fire, without acknowledging that both qualities nearly got him killed. McNiece hung the medal in his bedroom closet and rarely mentioned it to visitors. But sometimes, when fellow veterans gathered at American Legion meetings or VFW barbecues, someone would ask about the bridge at Normandy. McNiece would deflect with humor or change the subject, unwilling to explain that heroes are mostly just terrified men who run toward danger because someone has to. The real weight of that morning, the crushing responsibility, the split-second timing, the pure luck of survival, remained locked in memory where citations couldn't reach. The PPSh-41 submachine gun still lies buried in Norman mud, alongside countless other artifacts of that desperate summer. But the detonation chord, the blast pattern, and the sound of steel giving way live on in the nightmares of one demolition sergeant who learned that legend is always lighter than memory and that some truths are too heavy for official reports. If this story reminded you that behind every medal and mission report there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.